Essentially, this has been such a politically damaging experience for the administration, for Republicans, that it really just makes you wonder what is in those files. And I don't think it's necessarily anything criminal, but it suggests that there is something embarrassing, or perhaps Donald Trump is protecting someone else. Who knows? But this has been a true fiasco for the administration, and every attempt they've tried to kind of wiggle out of it has really just made the problem worse.
Will Sommer, a journalist at The Bulwark, thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thanks for having me.
We have to start off with, of course, the House of Representatives. They're expected to vote on this bill today that would force the DOJ to release these Epstein files. Now, while this would obviously still need to go to the Senate, Trump confirmed that he will sign the bill if it passes the House and then the Senate. Now, this is a big U-turn from what we've seen in the last few months. We only saw 4 Republicans signing the discharge petition, and Donald Trump, of course, continuously saying that he has nothing to hide while helping to stonewall the release of this. So, Will, what did you make of this?
I mean, this is a big reversal for the president. I mean, the Republicans and the administration have tried to stop this petition from making it to the House floor for months. They have twice held the House of Representatives. They essentially closed it early or refused to reopen it to avoid this vote. And now that they finally had to reopen it to end the government shutdown, now they're facing the landslide, I think, that they expected. Basically, they were a handful of Republicans stuck with Democrats to get this to the House floor. And now Trump is looking at, had he tried to keep people from voting for this, I think he would have faced a huge amount of defections. And so to save face, he's saying, well, actually, I would love if the files would come out. Let's do it. And so now I think we're looking at potentially a unanimous vote in the House when they hold this vote.
Last week, as I mentioned, we only had 4 Republicans out of the 218 that had signed this discharge petition. Today, as you mentioned, Will, it could be a unanimous vote. So the New York Times is reporting that Trump was getting aides to warn Republicans against voting for it, even apparently brought one Republican to the Situation Room to talk about it. So do you think that says more about Republicans actually wanting the release of these Epstein files and that they were always worried for the political backlash from Trump, or they're just now following the leader?
I think that essentially Trump has given them permission to do this. I think they wanted to vote for it anyway. Perhaps not. I think there's probably a mix of personal and political motive here. I do think a lot of Republicans have been interested in this case for a long time, in part because people like J.D. Vance and FBI Director Kash Patel were saying it was important. But also I think the reality is they don't want to be answering they don't want to be explaining why they voted against this to their constituents.
And that's fair. And one of the arguments that Thomas Massey was saying, he was saying that, Donald Trump's not going to be president forever, but your vote will forever be on your legacy. So, Will, this clip of Trump has gone viral where he's on Air Force One and a reporter asks him a question about the Epstein files. He's clearly quite over it. He's sick of this being the dominating headline of the day. He responds, "Quiet, piggy," while pointing his finger at the reporter. So does this, in conjunction with the stalling, the backflipping, and the anger at reporters' questions, does it look like there's a cover-up that's now blowing up?
It's a really weird situation. I mean, I think as reporters, we try not to jump to conclusions or to speculate too much. But on the other hand, you have to admit, it's weird. I mean, we know Donald Trump was really close with Jeffrey Epstein. And then there have been all of these things that have come out over the past few months, whether it's Trump's birthday letter to Epstein about sort of sharing secrets and young women, and the sort of nude illustration, to the emails that came out last week that demonstrated that Epstein certainly believes that he had some kind of leverage or some ability to blackmail Trump. And the other thing I would add here is that Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's crony, she was mysteriously moved to a much nicer prison after saying that Trump was innocent. And so it makes you wonder what kind of deal was struck. I think there are so many questions, and the president seems really embattled right now.
Thomas Massey, he told reporters, he said, the Speaker, the Attorney General, the FBI Director, the President and the Vice President could have all saved us time and embarrassment for our party if they'd just done this thing 4 months ago. So do you feel, Will, as if this has plagued the Republican Party and plagued Donald Trump badly?
I think there has to be essentially this has been such a politically damaging experience for the administration for Republicans that it really just makes you wonder what is in those files. And I don't think it's necessarily anything criminal, but it suggests that there is something embarrassing, or perhaps Donald Trump is protecting someone else. Who knows? But this has been a true fiasco for the administration, and every attempt they've tried to kind of wiggle out of it has really just made the problem worse. And so if their calculus was that this was such a big deal, whatever's in those files, that it was worth all this political blowback, again, I think it'll be very interesting to see what is in those files.
Thomas Massey, he worries that Trump is opening these investigations as a way to stop all the files from being released, almost as a way to kind of control what documents get publicized, especially because he believes that one of the reasons why Trump stonewalled, or maybe the only reason why he stonewalled, is not necessarily about him, but about protecting his rich billionaire friends.
Yeah, and I think that's a very politically potent thing to say. I mean, the idea that Donald Trump is not this populist leader who's looking after the little guy or the forgotten man, as he's put it, but that he's just another rich guy who wants to create a separate justice system for the rich and powerful. And I think we've seen a lot of examples of that. Whether his pardons for white collar criminals. Essentially, this is an administration that does not, I think, see that there's much of a rule of law if you're a Republican or you're a friend of Trump or you're rich. And so, I think that idea that Trump is betraying the MAGA base, I think, is something that's starting to dog the president.
These files, obviously, they're in the hands of the FBI and the DOJ, but the argument is that they should be released so that anyone named in these, victim testimonies and more evidence than what we're not privy to, because we've obviously only seen documents released from Epstein's estate. So that there'll be names in there from these victims' testimonies, and that these people should be investigated in the way in which that Ghislaine Maxwell was. And of course, she went on to be prosecuted and sentenced. So do you think that Donald Trump has seen these files, or if the narrative is true that he's trying to protect certain people, he might even just be taking a guess as to what's in there and who could potentially be named?
Well, just in the case of Trump himself, the Wall Street Journal reported that Trump was told that his name had come up in the files, and this was right before he decided the files would not come out. So, you can kind of draw your own connection there. There's an FBI whistleblower report that the FBI agents reviewing the files for release were told to flag any mention of Trump's name. And then when the Attorney General and the FBI director have been in front of Congress, they've been asked, well, what happened to those documents that had Trump's name on them? And they won't answer. They completely stonewall. And that makes me wonder what did happen to those documents, and why is this being treated as such a serious thing that they can't even kind of try to obfuscate around it? And so, I mean, certainly we know Donald Trump was friends with both Epstein, but also that he had a lot of rich and powerful friends who were also friends with Epstein. And maybe he's protecting some of them, or maybe he's just looking out for himself, which I would say it would be a pretty common thing for the president to do.
The Republicans who have been supporting Trump all kind of have the argument that if the Democrats are so concerned with these Epstein files and so adamant that they should be released, then why didn't they do it under the Biden administration? So why do you think that is the case, Will? And the other argument, I think it was James Comer, he was saying that the oversight Democrats, they dropped these 3 bombshell emails last week that all mention Trump, almost as if they were cherry picked out of those 20,000 documents that went on to be released by the entire House Oversight Committee. So, of course, the Biden administration, Maxwell ended up being investigated. But there are obviously other names who engaged in Epstein's sex trafficking and pedophilia rings. So why do you think it is that, the Biden administration didn't release these as well? Because you now have Democrats coming out and saying that they should be released.
Yeah, I mean, I think partially that can be explained by the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell was going through her prosecution really up until essentially the end of the Biden administration and her sentencing. So, on one hand, I think there's that legal argument. On the other, I do think it's I mean, the reality is, I think this has been a really Republican issue. The idea that all of the files need to come out up until the Trump administration decided that they shouldn't come out, and then Democrats really rallied around it. I think in terms of the email release, obviously this has become a political process. I mean, I think Democrats have really seen an opportunity here to upset Trump supporters, to sort of alienate them from Trump, and cause trouble for Trump. On the other hand, I think the Republicans are doing the same. I mean, they're releasing, after the Democrats released a few emails, the Republicans released a real flood of emails, I think, to distract and to point out fairly that, Epstein was friends with a lot of powerful Democrats as well. And so, I mean, yes, it's Congress. It's become a political process. And hopefully, at the end, some actual answers will be found. But I certainly would acknowledge that, I mean, there's a lot of political maneuvering going on here.
And Will, Democrats, they run their own risk of these being out. You never know what we're going to get out of information about Bill Clinton. We've seen emails surface from former Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton and top advisor to Obama, Larry Summers. His emails were made public last week. One in 2017 said that he observed that half the IQ in the world was possessed by women, without mentioning they're more than 51% of the population. He also was speaking to him about a woman, saying, I think for now I'm not going anywhere with her except economics mentor. And then what we saw was that he ended up telling Politico that he's going to take a step back from, public life. He said, I'm deeply ashamed of my actions and recognize the pain they have caused. I take full responsibility for my misguided decision to continue communicating with Mr. Epstein while continuing to fulfill my teaching obligations. I will be stepping back from public commitments as part of my broader effort to rebuild trust and repair relationships. So, I mean, Will, as damaging as this has obviously been for Donald Trump and his administration and potentially, his cohort of rich friends, it could still be risky business for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are clearly a lot of powerful Democrats who were friends with Epstein, went on his plane, went to his island, and you mentioned Bill Clinton, former Harvard president, and kind of Democratic, sometimes official Larry Summers. I mean, I think the emails really expose this sort of network, this group of really powerful, creepy, often men who were asking, and what's notable about these emails is I believe all of them, or at least most of them, come after Epstein's first sex crime conviction. So it's not like these guys could claim they didn't know what he was up to, and they were still friends with him, and they were still seeking his advice. They were still trying to get things out of him. And I think it has, I guess the broader takeaway, aside from Trump, is I think it has sort of fueled more populist criticism of the wealthy and powerful in America.
Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, he told Chris Cuomo on his show, he said that in 2016, Jeffrey told me that he said what he knew, that if he said what he knew about the candidates, they'd have to cancel the election. Jeffrey definitely had dirt on Trump. Trump can deny all he wants, but it's pretty clear everything Trump says is a lie. So that is obviously in the lead up to the 2016 election. And at the same time, yesterday or last night, Epstein's former lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, he said that he asked Epstein if he had any dirt on Trump, and he said no. So, I mean, Will, it's really hard to know the truth here when you've got his brother saying one thing about the fact that he said that he had dirt on Trump, and then the other is his lawyer saying the absolute opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is obviously Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who who enjoyed sort of seeming to hold this power over people and kind of insinuating himself in powerful circles. We know from the emails that he was telling people like Ghislaine Maxwell or the journalist Michael Wolff that he had some kind of leverage over Trump that, and obviously I think that extends to the Clinton family as well in the case of Bill Clinton. And so it makes you wonder. I mean, I think on one hand, perhaps he had nothing on Trump and he was just kind of trying to impress people. On the other hand, I mean, you have to go back to why is the administration acting so strangely about these documents?
Just finally, Will, how do you think the next few days will play out for Donald Trump? Do you think that this is a real sinking ship for him and his administration, or do you think he'll be able to kind of recover politically from this?
Well, I mean, in the short term, this is going to go to the Senate, and I think it's been assumed for a while that the Senate wouldn't take it up; it would just die there. But now it seems like there's more energy. Some Republicans are saying, "Sure, I'll vote for it." So maybe it will pass there, and then it goes to Trump. And obviously, he said he'll sign it. I think in the longer term, whether or not this passes, a couple things happen. whether the administration is going to try to still block some of the files, say, well, now we're investigating Democrats and we can't release all the files or something like that. And then ultimately, whether Democrats win back one of the chambers of Congress in the midterms next November. I think that if that happens, and it probably will happen, then I think Trump will face a lot more subpoenas and more shoes are going to keep on dropping.
Will Sommer, thank you for joining the Trump Report today.
Thanks for having me.